The champagne flute shattered against the hardwood floor, crystal fragments scattering across the imported oak like tiny daggers. Mira Daniels stood frozen in the doorway of her bedroom. Her wedding anniversary gift, an envelope containing tickets for a surprise trip to Santorini, slipping from her trembling fingers on their bed, the one they'd chosen together at Restoration Hardware after weeks of deliberation, the one where they'd made love countless times, where they'd whispered dreams and promises in the dark. Her husband lay entangled with a woman whose red hair spilled across Mira's Egyptian cotton pillowcases like a bloodstain. Mira. Her husband, Ethan, lurched upright, yanking the duvet to cover them both. The woman beside him, young, probably late 20s, looked more annoyed than embarrassed, her green eyes narrowing as she assessed Mira with cool detachment. "I thought you weren't coming home until 6, Ethan stammered, his face flushing crimson beneath his dark beard. Mira's mind registered bizarre details with crystalline clarity. The half-empty bottle of her favorite rosé on the nightstand, the woman's lacy black bra dangling from the reading lamp Mira's mother had given them, Ethan's wedding ring, removed and placed carefully on the dresser. When Mira finally spoke, her voice was unnervingly calm. "It's our anniversary." Her gaze moved slowly from her husband to the stranger in her bed, then back again. There was something in Mira's eyes, something that made Ethan's smug confidence falter. "This isn't what you think," he tried. Mira tilted her head slightly, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "No, Ethan, it's exactly what I think." She picked up her phone from the entryway table. "I just need to take a picture." The flash went off 3 times before either of them could react. "What the fuck are you doing?" the woman shrieked, diving beneath the covers. "Making memories," Mira replied softly. "Because this is the last one we'll ever make together." The look that passed between them lasted only seconds, but in it, Ethan saw something he'd never witnessed in his wife's expression before. It wasn't heartbreak or rage or even disgust, it was promise. 14 years earlier, Mira Chen had been a promising architectural designer with a portfolio that caught the attention of Westbrook and Associates, one of Seattle's most prestigious firms. At 26, she'd moved from San Francisco with dreams of working on sustainable urban developments and eventually launching her own practice. Ethan Daniels was 31, the son of the firm's founding partner, with an easy charm and the kind of confidence that came from never having faced real failure. When he'd been assigned as her mentor, Mira had initially been wary. She'd heard rumors about his reputation with female associates. But Ethan had surprised her, showing genuine interest in her ideas and advocating for her designs to be included in major projects. Their romance had developed gradually, professional lines blurring over late nights, reviewing blueprints, and weekend site visits. By the time Ethan proposed after 18 months, Mira had convinced herself that the whispers about his past indiscretions were just that, whispers from jealous colleagues. The wedding at his family's waterfront estate had been featured in Seattle Magazine. Mira's immigrant parents, who had sacrificed everything to put her through architecture school, had looked both proud and slightly overwhelmed by the Daniels family's wealth and influence. Her father had pulled her aside before the ceremony, his English still heavily accented after 30 years in America. "He is a lucky man, Mira. Make sure he never forgets this." On their honeymoon in Italy, as they lay in a 4-poster bed in a Tuscan villa, Ethan had traced the outline of her face and made his first real promise to her. "I'm going to make you so happy," he whispered. "I'm going to give you everything." For nearly a decade he had. They'd built a life together, the elegant home in Magnolia with views of Puget Sound, the partnership track at the firm for Mira, the social circle of Seattle's elite. When Mira's mother was diagnosed with cancer, Ethan had arranged for the best oncologist in the country. When she'd talked about wanting to explore more sustainable designs, he'd connected her with his environmentalist college roommate who now worked for the mayor. Mira had pushed aside the occasional late nights, the unexplained charges on credit card statements, the lingering sense of unfamiliar perfume. She'd chosen to believe him when he said he was working, networking, building their future. Even when her closest friend Zoe had gently suggested that Ethan might not be completely faithful, Mira had defended him fiercely. "You don't know him like I do," she'd insisted. "He wouldn't risk what we have." But lately, the evidence had become harder to ignore. Text messages that made him walk out of rooms to answer. Weekend golf trips where he returned without a tan or stories. And most tellingly, the growing emotional distance, the way he no longer really saw her when she spoke, how his compliments had become rote and hollow. 3 months ago, she'd found a receipt for a hotel downtown, on a night he claimed to be in Portland for a client meeting. When confronted, his explanation had been so smoothly delivered, so plausible, that she'd almost believed it. Almost. That night, after he'd fallen asleep, she'd installed a location tracking app on his phone, not because she wanted confirmation of his betrayal, but because a part of her still desperately hoped she was wrong. It was Zoe who finally showed her the truth. Over lunch on the waterfront, her friend had slid a manila envelope across the table. "I hired someone," Zoe admitted, not meeting Mira's eyes. "I couldn't stand watching you doubt yourself anymore." Inside were photographs. Ethan entering an upscale apartment building in Capitol Hill. Ethan at dinner with a red-headed woman at a restaurant Mira had been wanting to try. Ethan kissing the woman against the door of a silver Tesla, the same model he'd been considering buying for them. Her name was Vanessa Kirby. According to the private investigator's report, she was 29, a pharmaceutical sales rep who'd met Ethan at a charity gala 7 months earlier. Their affair had been consistent since then. Twice-weekly rendezvous, weekend getaways disguised as business trips, even a shared rental in Whistler for a ski vacation while Mira had been in Hong Kong for a sustainable architecture conference. The betrayal wasn't just the sex, it was the life he was building parallel to their marriage, the future he was imagining with someone else while sleeping beside her every night. "What are you going to do?" Zoe had asked. Mira had stared at the photographs for a long time before carefully returning them to the envelope. "I'm going to think," she'd said. "And then I'm going to act." For weeks, she'd maintained the performance of their marriage while secretly making preparations. She'd consulted with a divorce attorney who had a reputation for being particularly ruthless with unfaithful spouses. She'd documented financial records, copied emails, secured her own assets. She'd even recorded conversations where Ethan lied about his whereabouts, storing the evidence methodically. What she hadn't anticipated was catching them in her own bed on their 14th anniversary. She had come home early to prepare a special dinner, to give him one last chance to confess, to choose their marriage before she revealed what she knew. Instead, fate had delivered a far more visceral confirmation than any surveillance photograph could provide. The day after discovering Ethan and Vanessa in her bed, Mira moved through her morning routine with mechanical precision. She showered, dressed in her most expensive suit, applied her makeup with careful attention, and ate a small breakfast of toast and coffee. To anyone observing, she might have appeared completely normal, perhaps a bit quiet, but composed. Inside, a transformation was taking place. The divorce papers sat in her briefcase, prepared weeks ago but never served. Her original plan had been calculated but relatively merciful: a clean break, a fair settlement, a mutual agreement to spare them both public humiliation. That plan now seemed naive, almost laughable. Ethan hadn't come home after she'd caught them. He'd called repeatedly, left desperate voicemails, sent a barrage of text messages alternating between apologies and explanations. She'd responded to none of them. Now, sitting in her home office, the room she'd designed herself with its wall of windows overlooking the garden, she opened her laptop and began. First, she transferred half of their joint savings to her private account, the maximum allowed before divorce proceedings without triggering legal complications. Next, she emailed their family lawyer requesting a meeting, copying Ethan and using language that was deliberately vague but concerning. Then she called her in-laws, with whom she'd always maintained a warm relationship. "Margaret, it's Mira," she said when her mother-in-law answered. "I hate to bother you, but I'm worried about Ethan. He didn't come home last night, and he's been acting strange lately. I thought maybe he'd reached out to you." The concern in Margaret Daniels' voice was genuine. "No, dear, we haven't heard from him." "What do you mean by strange?" "Mood swings, secretive behavior, unexplained absences," Mira said, each word carefully chosen. "I'm probably overreacting. It's just, with his father's history of depression, I get nervous." The seed planted, she ended the call with promises to keep Margaret updated. Ethan's father's mental health struggles weren't widely known outside the family, a confidence Ethan had shared with her during their early days together. Using it felt both terrible and justified. At work, she met with senior partners under the pretense of discussing an upcoming project. Instead, she revealed her intention to divorce Ethan, citing his infidelity in professional but clear terms. "I wanted you to hear it from me first," she told them. "I value my position here and hope this won't affect your perception of my work." The partners, two men who had known Ethan since childhood, exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Of course not," said Harrison Wells, the most senior partner. "Your work speaks for itself, Mira." She nodded gratefully. "There's one more thing. I believe Ethan has been charging personal expenses to client accounts, specifically hotel rooms and dinners that weren't related to business." She slid a folder across the table. "I noticed discrepancies while reviewing our joint finances. It wasn't entirely true. The expenses had been legitimate, but categorized in ways that would require investigation to confirm. The audit would take weeks, during which Ethan's professional reputation would hang in limbo. By noon, she had met with HR to discuss separating her benefits from Ethan's and requesting a temporary leave of absence for personal matters. By 1, she had called the security company to change the codes on their home system. By 2, she had contacted a realtor about listing their vacation property in the San Juan Islands, a cabin Ethan loved but which was solely in her name, a wedding gift from her parents. At 3 o'clock, Ethan finally caught up with her, bursting into her office with the frantic energy of a man whose carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, closing the door behind him. "My mother called asking if I'm having a nervous breakdown. Harrison says there's an audit of my client accounts and the house code doesn't work." Mira looked up from her computer, her expression neutral. "I'm making changes." "You're trying to destroy me." "No, Ethan." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "I'm simply creating consequences." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Look, I know what you saw was unforgivable, but we can work through this. 14 years, Mira. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It meant everything to me," she said quietly. "Which is why I'm taking it back. All the years, all the sacrifices, all the times I diminished myself to accommodate your ego and appetites." "This isn't you," he said, his voice lowering. "You're not vindictive. You're right." She gathered her belongings. "The Mira you knew wasn't vindictive, but that Mira died yesterday at 4:17 p.m. in our bedroom." As she moved toward the door, he grabbed her arm. "Don't do this. Please. I'll do anything. Therapy, an open marriage, whatever you want." She looked down at his hand until he released her. "There's only one thing I want now, Ethan," she said. "Justice." 3 weeks later, Mira sat in the elegant private dining room of Canlis, Seattle's most exclusive restaurant, sipping a glass of Cabernet as she waited for her dinner companion. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights reflected on Lake Union like scattered diamonds. The audit of Ethan's client accounts had revealed no actual improprieties, as she'd known it wouldn't, but the scrutiny had damaged his standing at the firm. His father, the semi-retired founding partner, had been forced to intervene, creating a rift in their once close relationship. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, with Ethan still attempting reconciliation while simultaneously trying to protect his assets. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that Mira had discovered something far more damaging than his affair with Vanessa. The door opened, and Vanessa Kirby walked in, her confident stride faltering slightly when she saw Mira. She was wearing an emerald dress that complemented her red hair, diamond studs winking in her ears, diamonds that Mira recognized as the ones Ethan had claimed to have lost last Christmas. "You're not Ethan," Vanessa said, stopping short of the table. "No." Mira gestured to the chair opposite her. "But I am the person who texted you from his phone." "Please join me." Vanessa hesitated, her hand still on the door handle. "I'm not here for a confrontation," Mira assured her. "Just a conversation." After a moment's consideration, Vanessa sat down, her posture defensive. "If this is some attempt to humiliate me—" "It's not," Mira interrupted. She reached for the bottle of wine and poured a glass for Vanessa. "Though I'd have every right," Vanessa didn't touch the wine. "What do you want?" "To understand," Mira said simply, "and to share information I think you should have." A waiter appeared with appetizers, oysters and a charcuterie board. Mira thanked him and waited until he withdrew before continuing. "How much has Ethan told you about his past?" she asked. Vanessa's expression tightened. "Enough. I know about your marriage, if that's what you're asking." "That's not what I'm asking." Mira selected an oyster and squeezed lemon over it. "I'm asking about the others." Something flickered in Vanessa's eyes. Uncertainty. "What others?" Mira slid a tablet across the table. On it was a document with names, dates, photographs, evidence compiled over weeks of investigation. "After I found you two, I became curious," Mira explained. "About whether you were the first?" "You weren't. You're not even the fifth." Vanessa scrolled through the document, her composure cracking as she recognized a pattern identical to her own relationship with Ethan. The same restaurants, the same hotel rooms, even similar gifts. "This could be fabricated," she said. But her voice lacked conviction. "It could be," Mira agreed. "But it isn't. And there's more." She took the tablet back and opened another file. Financial records showing transfers from Ethan's personal account to various women over the past 8 years. "These aren't gifts," Mira said quietly. "They're payments." For silence, Vanessa's face had gone pale. "I don't understand." 3 of his previous affairs ended with the women threatening to expose him. Instead of risking scandal, he paid them, using money from our joint account, I might add. Mira sipped her wine. "But that's not why I asked you here." She opened a final document, medical records. 2 months ago, I found out that Ethan had been seeing a specialist, Mira continued, her voice steady despite the pain behind her words. "He has HPV, a high-risk strain linked to cancer. He never told me. I had to find out during my annual exam when abnormal cells were detected." She looked directly at Vanessa. "Have you been tested recently?" The color drained completely from Vanessa's face. "He wouldn't," she began. "He would," Mira interrupted gently. "He did. To me, his wife of 14 years. Why would you be different?" Vanessa pushed the tablet away, her hands trembling slightly. "Why are you telling me this? What do you gain?" Mira considered the question seriously. "Nothing directly. But you deserve to know who you're really involved with. Not the charming, attentive man who makes you feel special, but the man who consistently places his desires above everyone else's well-being. You want me to end it with him? What you do is your choice," Mira said. "But yes, I hope you value yourself enough to walk away. Not for my sake. Our marriage is over regardless, but for yours." Vanessa stared at her wine glass for a long moment. "I thought he loved me," she whispered, more to herself than to Mira. "He probably believes he does," Mira replied. "Ethan is very good at convincing himself that his current obsession is true love. It makes his behavior easier to justify." The realization seemed to wash over Vanessa in waves. First disbelief, then anger, finally a sort of resigned clarity. "What are you going to do with all this?" she asked, gesturing to the tablet. "That depends partly on him," Mira said. "And partly on you. Me?" Mira leaned forward. "I've scheduled a press conference for Friday. The firm is announcing a major new sustainable development project. My design, my vision. Ethan will be there, as will the partners, major clients, and local press. And I'm prepared to publicly address our divorce, including his pattern of infidelity and his medical deception." She held Vanessa's gaze. "Unless you convince him to agree to my settlement terms beforehand," Vanessa laughed humorlessly. "Why would he listen to me?" "Because you're what he wants right now," Mira said. "And because you can make him understand exactly how much he stands to lose." "This is blackmail." "This is leverage," Mira corrected. "The difference is that I'm not asking for anything I don't deserve, just a fair division of assets and a clean break." Vanessa was silent for several moments, processing. Finally, she reached for her wine glass and took a long sip. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "I'm not who I was 3 weeks ago," Mira replied, as they continued their meal in a strange, tense detente. Mira felt no triumph, no vindication, only a hollow sense that justice, when it finally came, couldn't restore what had been lost. But it could perhaps enable something new to begin. Friday morning dawned bright and clear, the Seattle skyline crisp against a rare, cloudless sky. The press conference was scheduled for 11 a.m. at the downtown hotel where the firm often hosted major announcements. Mira dressed with particular care, a tailored charcoal suit that projected both authority and elegance, pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. Her phone had been silent since her dinner with Vanessa 2 nights earlier. No calls or texts from Ethan, no communication from their lawyers. She had no way of knowing if her gambit had worked, if Vanessa had conveyed her message, or what response awaited her at the press conference. The settlement terms she'd proposed were straightforward but non-negotiable: half of all marital assets, full ownership of their primary residence, removal of her name from any shared debt, and a clean professional break. She would establish her own practice, taking 3 major clients with whom she had built relationships. In exchange, she would maintain absolute silence about Ethan's infidelities and medical deception. As her car approached the hotel, Mira felt a peculiar calm settle over her. Whatever happened in the next hour would determine the trajectory of her future. But she was prepared for either outcome. The conference room was already filled with journalists, industry colleagues, city officials, and the firm's major clients. At the front, a podium stood before a large screen displaying renders of the new development, an innovative mixed-use community designed to integrate affordable housing with luxury units, commercial spaces, and green areas. Mira's vision, brought to life after 3 years of planning. Harrison Wells was speaking when she entered, outlining the project's scope and economic impact. Ethan sat on the small stage with the other partners, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met briefly as she made her way to the front row, but he quickly looked away. When Harrison introduced her as the lead architect, the applause was enthusiastic. Mira moved to the podium with practiced poise, her presentation flawless as she explained the design philosophy behind the development. She spoke about sustainability, community integration, and the responsibility of architects to create spaces that fostered human connection and environmental harmony. "This project represents everything I believe architecture should be," she concluded. "A bridge between what is and what could be, between individual needs and collective good, between present concerns and future possibilities." As she stepped away from the podium, Harrison announced that questions would be taken after a brief statement from the firm's founding partner, Robert Daniels, who had emerged from semi-retirement for the occasion. Robert approached the podium, his resemblance to his son striking despite his advanced age. He adjusted his glasses and looked out over the assembled crowd with the gravity of a man about to make a significant pronouncement. "Before we take questions about this extraordinary project," he began, "I have an announcement regarding the future leadership of Westbrook and Associates." Mira felt a flutter of unease. This wasn't on the agenda. After careful consideration, the partnership has decided to establish a new division focused exclusively on sustainable development, Robert continued. "This division will be led by Mira Daniels, who will be elevated to full partner, effective immediately." A murmur swept through the room. Mira's composure faltered momentarily as she processed his words. "Additionally," Robert said, his voice taking on a more somber tone, "we are announcing a restructuring of our existing leadership. My son, Ethan Daniels, will be stepping down from his role to pursue independent projects. Now the murmurs became outright conversation as journalists leaned toward each other, sensing a story beyond the prepared announcement. Ethan's face had gone rigid, his knuckles white where he gripped the arms of his chair. Robert cleared his throat loudly, regaining the room's attention. These changes reflect our firm's commitment to innovation and integrity in all aspects of our business. We believe they position Westbrook and Associates to better serve our clients and community moving forward. With that, he stepped away, signaling for questions to begin. Most were directed to Mira, focusing on the development's features and timeline. She answered professionally, giving no indication of the shock she felt at Robert's announcement. As the event concluded, Ethan disappeared quickly through a side door. Robert approached Mira, taking her elbow and guiding her toward a private room adjacent to the conference space. "I apologize for not warning you," he said once they were alone. It seemed better to present it as a unified decision rather than risk complications. Mira studied her father-in-law's face. "You know," she stated simply. "Enough," he acknowledged. "Vanessa Kirby came to see me yesterday. She was quite thorough. And you believe her?" "I didn't need to." Robert removed his glasses, suddenly looking every one of his 73 years. "I've known who my son is for a very long time, Mira. I just hoped— Well, I hoped you might change him." The admission hung between them, his complicity in silence, his willingness to believe that someone else could fix what he had failed to address. "The partnership offer," Mira said. "Is it legitimate or just damage control?" "It's both," Robert admitted candidly. "Your work merits the recognition. But yes, we also need to contain this situation before it affects the firm's reputation." "And Ethan? What happens to him?" "He retains his ownership stake but no operational role. A generous severance, a positive public narrative about his departure." Robert sighed heavily. "In many ways, still more than he deserves." Mira considered this. It wasn't the complete justice she had imagined, but perhaps it was justice enough. "I'd like to discuss modified terms for my divorce settlement," she said after a moment. Robert nodded. "I thought you might." Later that afternoon, as Mira cleared out her office to prepare for moving to the new division's space, Ethan appeared in her doorway. He looked diminished somehow, the confident swagger replaced by a wary hesitation. "Congratulations on your promotion," he said. His attempt at nonchalance falling flat, Mira continued packing books into a cardboard box. "Thank you. My father always did like you better than me." "This isn't about likability, Ethan." He entered the office fully, closing the door behind him. "No, it's about revenge. You've taken everything. My job, my reputation, my father's respect." "I haven't taken anything," Mira replied calmly. "I've simply revealed the truth. What happened afterward were consequences of your own making. Vanessa told me what you did. The dinner, the evidence, all of it." He shook his head. "I never thought you could be so calculating." "I learned from the best." Mira placed a framed award in the box. "Did she also tell you about her test results?" Ethan flinched visibly. "That was a low blow, Mira." "Lower than risking my health without my knowledge or consent?" He had no answer for that. "The revised settlement will be delivered to your lawyer tomorrow," she continued. "I think you'll find it fair considering the circumstances." "And if I don't agree?" Mira finally looked up at him directly. "Then I go public with everything. Not just the affairs, but the medical deception, the emotional manipulation, all of it. Your father might be willing to help you save face professionally, but he can't control what I say to the world." The threat hung in the air between them, its weight almost tangible. "You know what's ironic?" Ethan said finally. "I actually did love you. In my way." "Your way was never enough," Mira replied, not unkindly. "Not for me, not for Vanessa, not for any of them. That's why you kept searching." He looked at her as if seeing her clearly for the first time, not as the adoring wife, the talented protégée, or even the vengeful betrayed woman, but as someone complete in herself, someone he had never fully understood. "For what it's worth," he said. "I am sorry." Mira nodded, accepting the apology without forgiveness. So am I. After he left, she finished packing in solitude, each item a memory of the life she was leaving behind. When everything was boxed and labeled, she stood at the window overlooking the city she had helped shape, watching as the afternoon sun gilded the buildings in golden light. Her phone vibrated with a text from Zoe. "Dinner tonight to celebrate the promotion?" Mira smiled, her first genuine smile in weeks. "Yes. And I have news." She had decided that morning to accept an invitation she'd received months earlier, a 6-month fellowship at a renowned architectural institute in Copenhagen. A clean break, a new beginning in a city where no one knew her as Ethan Daniels' wife. As she left the office that had been her professional home for 14 years, Mira felt neither triumph nor bitterness. She felt something far more valuable. Freedom, not just from Ethan, but from the version of herself that had accepted less than she deserved. The revenge that had seemed so important weeks ago now felt like merely a step in a longer journey. Not an end, but a beginning. She had dismantled a life built on illusions and was ready to create something real, meant not to impress others, but to protect and honor her own truth. Outside, Seattle's spring bloomed with cherry blossoms, pink petals drifting in the breeze. Mira lifted her face to the sun, breathing deeply. There would still be pain, regrets, and trust to rebuild, but for now, she stood exactly where she needed to be, firm in her power, architect of her own future.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.